Good afternoon on a beautiful sunny day. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the 2021 Central Mass Manufacturing Forum and Awards. I'm Peter Stanton, publisher of the Worcester Business Journal and the publisher of Cool Stuff, Made in Massachusetts, a workforce development publication and website that promotes manufacturing careers to tomorrow's workforce. It's great to have you with us today, even if it is on Zoom. This event is being presented in two distinct parts. The first part, a panel conversation with a terrific group of manufacturers, will wrap up at around 5, and that will immediately be followed by the WBJ Manufacturing Excellence Awards video presentations that's going to honor 6 firms and 1 individual for their excellent work, both over the long haul and certainly during this pandemic period. To make this event happen, we rely on the generous support of our sponsors, who are not only great partners, but also committed to the growth and prosperity of the manufacturing industry here in Massachusetts. So please join me in giving special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Mass MEP, and our corporate sponsor, S&G Business Consultants and CPAs. Before I kick off the panel discussion, just a couple of notes for the audience. If you have a question for the moderator or one of the panelists, please type it in to the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. Also, today's webcast is going to be recorded, and a link will be sent to you after the event in case you want to view it again or share it with a colleague. We have a really strong group with us this afternoon. So without further ado, let me introduce them. First, our moderator is Lisa Derby-Oden, who is a workforce program and project development coordinator at Mass MEP. Our panelists are John Bergeron, the Director of Organizational Performance at United Solutions, which is in Leominster. Darcy Cook, the Director of Emergency Management for Safety Trainers out of Worcester. Eric Longo, Director of Operations at US PAC, also out of Leominster. And David Zamarin, Founder and Chief Executive Officer at Detrapel, that is headquarters in Framingham. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. I had to unmute myself there. I almost forgot that, but I want to say what a pleasure it is to be here with these folks today. It's always such a treat to talk with other folks out in the manufacturing realm. And to start out with, what I'd like to do is have everybody just please give us a brief overview of your company, and then in one word, characterize what the last year was for you and your business. Start with you, Darcy.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darcy Cook, and so I actually own a safety company. So although I am not in manufacturing, I am in manufacturing all the time. It's just from a different perspective. So we are a safety consulting, training, and an advisor to manufacturers. And let me just tell you, having come from safety, and if you can imagine all the different manufacturers that we've managed to work with over the last year, the one word that describes my every single day, I had no idea what it was going to look like, right, is chaos. Every day it was an organized chaos. It was fires everywhere, and our job was to put them out as fast as we could on a daily and regular basis.
That's great. Thanks, Darcy. Okay, how about you, John? We'll jump to you next.
I'm John Bergeron. I work for United Solutions. We're neatly nestled in the foothills of the Mount Wachusett area. United is a 100-year-old company. We're a organizational centenarian. Say it 3 times fast. The company was started in 1919 by a gentleman by the name of Eugene Terigny, supplying combs and brushes and other cosmetic sundries. When the decorative combs went out of business, he went out of style. He started making more novelty plastic items, some decorative, some utilitarian. And then in the 80s, his grandson, Edward Zephyr, a UMass grad, took over the business and began molding a proprietary line of housewares: pet dishes, tumblers, ice cube trays, dish pans, laundry baskets. And as the retail market grew and some of the retailers were looking for more promotional item to go with their daily offering of goods. United kind of fit that niche and grew very, very rapidly in the 80s. And in the 90s, we took on a line of blow molded trash cans, partnering with Rubbermaid, as well as a line of cans of our own to do outdoor trash. And then we, in 2017, we purchased a Rubbermaid consumer tote storage line, and I've been working with that for the past 3 years. And we've now we're owned by G2, a capital company, but very good, strong company to work for. The vision is fantastic. I think a boon to moving United forward. And so right now, everything's working well for United. So here's looking for another 100 years.
So what's your one word?
Cerebral.
Ah, these are great. I love these. All right, how about you, Eric?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eric Longo, the Director of Operations at High Gear US Pack. High Gear started over 25 years ago in the automotive industry. We manufacture fuel additives and interior and exterior automotive cleaning products. In 2004, we opened a manufacturing facility in Leominster to be able to control our own manufacturing costs, reduce our waste, keep jobs in central Massachusetts, and be close to shipping ports. Those are the main reasons for picking Leominster. Now, once we had our own manufacturing, now we don't only manufacture for our High Gear product line, but we also private label for other businesses. The biggest private label accounts that we have are in the household cleaning products. Our operations, now include developing new products, blending and packaging lines that fill anything from 2-ounce bottles to gallon jugs. We also have bulk filling capability, totes and drums, and over 300,000 square feet of warehouse in Leominster, Fitchburg, and Hudson. So happy to be a part of the panel today. Looking forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Okay, the one word?
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented. These are great. I'm glad you got us out of the starting with C letter words, but okay, how about you, David?
Hi, everyone. My name is David Zamarin. I'm the founder and CEO of Detrapel. And at Detrapel, we make all types of different chemical coatings, particularly in the protective coating space. And what that really means, the best way I can describe what we do, or primarily what we do, is we make a cancer-free version of Scotchgard. So if you're familiar with Scotchgard, we have a very similar core product, which is a fabric protector that could repel liquid-based stains, thereby saving you time and money by not having to replace your items. But we don't use any fluorinated chemistry. That's the biggest difference between us. We are a completely PFAS-free company. So that means everything from our protectors, our fabric protectors, to our industrial coatings, to our cleaning solutions, our stain removers, so on and so forth. And we're based in Framingham. We also, like everyone else, manufacture in-house. We do all of our own R&D. Pretty much everything that we do in our operation is in-house. And it's been my one word is that it's been very rewarding for the last year, which is and I'll jump into why, I'm sure, later on.
Excellent. Thank you, David. I was going to say, you actually kind of lead us right into my first question in a lot of ways, I think, which is, I think of the word disruption. Last year was a very disruptive year, but disruption does have sort of a double-edged definition. It can be devastating, or it can be the impetus for great innovation. And the pandemic was certainly disruptive, but there have also been silver linings that have come out of it as well. So I would like to know from you folks, how did your company pivot, and what silver lining or surprises did you discover? So why don't we go ahead and we'll start, since you gave us the lead into that, David, why don't we go ahead and have you start talking about how it was rewarding for you?
Sure. And Lisa, I think you're absolutely right. I think disruptive has a double meaning. And for us, I think, and every entrepreneur has their own mind, or every business owner has their own feelings about this. But with every single problem, every single challenge that comes about, there on the other side of that problem and challenge is a solution. And whoever can come up with a solution is likely going to, lead out of that problem successfully. And so we had a very interesting moment in March of last year, we had in 2019, we had just raised a little bit of venture capital or angel investments as well in the company. And we were planning on doing this big rollout in 2020. We had a trade show booked in March. And of course, the pandemic hit pretty hard here. And we were kind of struck with this question of, well, what do we do now? Because I don't think anyone cares about our products at this very moment. And my COO and I, we kind of sat down, we discussed, well, what are some of the kind of lowest hanging fruit here? And we realized that we were already developing cleaning products that we were planning on launching kind of as complementary products or supplementary products to our main line towards the end of the year. So we just kind of sped up that development. We're very fortunate to have in-house R&D. So we have multiple chemists full-time on staff, and two of them in particular have almost double the years of experience that I have alive. So they're very world-renowned researchers in their space. And so we tasked ourselves kind of to come up with a product that would fit the problem that people were facing. And at the time that was disinfectants, which eventually transitioned into other cleaning products and some innovative packaging as well. So for us, I think anyone who comes out of this last year, one crucial thing to know and to remember is that you're going to be coming out of it, right? And at some point, everyone does. And at some point, we have to always come up with a solution or some kind of betterment to what we're doing, even in the face of chaos.
That is so well said. And so I would like to know from the other manufacturers here how as well their companies sort of dealt with this in terms of pivoting and the silver lining. So John, how about you next?
Well, manufacturing being pretty straightforward, we had to take the disruption, which was the CDC talking often and inconsistently, and make sense of all that to try to keep our staff, our people, our teammates, our neighbors healthy and safe. And so as we learned how to distance, bringing people in through another door, in one way, out the other, don't meet in this room for morning briefings, separate out into an open air space. So we just sort of morphed, as the situation progressed. And eventually we realized that the best way to treat this virus was to treat it like a virus and not like a demon. It walks like a virus, talks like a virus, acts like a virus, and certainly separation in the workplace, division wherever possible, it helped. And the biggest challenge, I think, was getting the people themselves to buy into their own safety. We could do all that we needed to do, all that we knew we needed to do to help keep them safe. But many folks, it was just another day at the opera. It was just crazy. But constantly reinforcing, constantly being out there with the message, to separate, to keep safe, to sanitize, eventually won over. And I think the silver lining here, the takeaway that we had is you reconnect with your employees at this point, because now everybody's vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, we need to support one another and come together like we hadn't before. It's your lines, your strata of management and employee and upper management, all of that blurred and disappeared, and everybody was pulling in the same direction for the same cause. And from engaging with the employee at the moment they showed some signs of illness, encouraging people to call and be honest about what was going on so that we could direct them in the right way. We directed them to the right testing centers to get the right tests depending on their symptoms or whether they're asymptomatic, making sure that working with our insurance company to make sure that they didn't have to pay for any of these tests, that they were all free, to getting them back into the workplace safely within a reasonable amount of time. I think that gave people a little bit of hope, that there are people pulling for me, that someone cares about me more than just punching the clock and working at a molding machine, but that we're all human beings, and our basic dignity and our right to prosper and be safe should certainly trump everything else. And that's sort of my silver lining.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, John. We're going to talk a little bit more about workforce later on, but you've provided us with a great entree there. Eric, do you want to say just a couple of words about what you found for silver linings?
Sure. I think that US PAC High Gear definitely wanted to be a good neighbor in the community. And previously, when the SARS pandemic hit years before, they made hand sanitizer. So they immediately pivoted into hand sanitizer because our normal product lines were down, especially when the retail outlets were closed. When the retail outlets open, our cleaning products lines, they're just booming right now. We're killing it on our household cleaning products, as you can imagine. But we were able to bring hand sanitizer to essential workers, donating to the local fire and police. And I think that whole thing really gave the team and the company good pride of ownership and made us feel like we were good neighbors to the community.
That's great. So some of this touches a little bit on my next question, which goes into contingency and continuity planning. Again, disruption can, make you kind of start to try to fall back on some of those tools. And they have certainly been hot topics over the last year, but, primarily with that underpinning of safety. So I want to start out with Darcy on this question and find out what you've been seeing over the past year, Darcy, in terms of contingency and continuity planning and safety in the manufacturing realm.
Yeah. So first of all, none of us were ready for this, right? I think we can all agree to that. This came out of nowhere. I have this analogy that I back a year and a half ago when this was all going on. I said, look, we're all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. And all of us back then were just trying to figure out how to stay afloat. And so what we had to do, being a safety and regulatory compliance, first of all, I'm the girl who in college, if there was a movie I could watch instead of reading the book, I'd go watch the movie and then I take the test, right? So I had to be that for all of you. You guys had to figure out how to keep your doors open and change your product lines and keep your businesses going. And someone had to pay attention to Governor Baker changing his mind and CDC changing his mind and OSHA deciding what they were going to do and what's the local, Department of Public Health telling you to do and how does this apply and are we going to get in trouble on the HR side? And everyone was like, whoa, what is going on? So what we had to do is we had to basically, we had to redesign our organization. And we had to put all of our effort and all of our resources into navigating the same things that you guys were and trying to give you guys the Cliff Note version and keep you guys up to speed and with the information and the changes that needed to happen. Now that we're kind of through it. So the idea of business continuity, I think it has a different definition now. I think it has a different meaning, right? How we all were able to keep our doors open, how we're able to change product lines or survive during that period of time, the silver linings. We didn't see all that back then. Now I think that we can see it, right? And on business continuity and emergency preparedness, right? So you guys, I was around, my company started just before 9/11. And so when 9/11 happened, the new words were put into the dictionary that we never saw before. And the restructure of safety and the restructure of how we had to protect ourselves in the event that there was a major event and help wasn't coming to your company. It was a whole different new thought process back then. Now we have just experienced, again, when we have to protect our own, when we have to help out each other, when we have to Eric's point, be involved in community beyond just what we're doing and in our business, how can we be a good Samaritan beyond our doors? I think we're all talking about and looking at business continuity, emergency action planning, and sadly, I'm on the regulation side. So regulatory, checking the boxes of compliance and safety are actually two different things. And you guys are all going to be impacted by regulation that will be turning out pretty soon here. So OSHA did submit for new federal regulation. We're seeing all the directives is writing on the wall of what is to come. So we are going to be somewhat guided. Now, I will say this to all of you. No two manufacturers are the same. I don't care if you're doing the same widgets in the same town, you're not the same. OSHA doesn't tell you guys how to cross that finish line, but it does tell you need to cross that finish line. Business continuity, emergency action planning, you guys all have to have these conversations. Prevention is going to cost you less. You all just experienced. Imagine if we had this plan in play, right? Prevention is going to cost you less in the big scheme of things. So here's what I'm seeing. A third of you were rock solid and made lots of changes. A third of you did what you could do to survive. And a third of you is still figuring it out. When the regulations come down, there'll be a little bit more clarity, which is always helpful, right? Because we spent a lot of time, money, and resources in a lot of areas, and we weren't even sure really if that's the right way, right? We were all trying to figure it out. So I think that the conversation moving forward under business continuity and emergency preparedness and the pandemic are all going to continue the conversation. But we're going to have some guidance, which I think is really important right now, is we didn't have that. So I'm looking forward to some clear directions that are not confusing.
I so appreciate everything that you're saying there, Darcy, and I'm sure that the other folks on this panel all identified with a lot of what you were saying. And so I think rather than talking about how prepared everybody was, I'm going to just go ahead and move into our questions about workforce, because I know that during the pandemic, there were a lot of workforce teams that discovered new motivation and enthusiasm for their work. And I know John did a great job in talking about some of the impacts on his workforce. Because a lot of times companies felt like they were, part of the solution, part of what was going to help bring us out of this pandemic. So it really bind them together. So I'd like to know what people did see in their workforce. What changes did you make in your practices, and will these carry forward into the future? Like, will office people be able to work remotely and that kind of thing? I'll have a couple more questions that I want to add on about hybrid work environments, but we'll get to those. So let's go ahead and start with you on this one, Eric.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, we did a lot of the same things John talked about, is trying to follow the guidelines on distancing. We changed our production schedule so people weren't in the break room at the same time. We changed how they punched in and punched out so they weren't touching time clocks. We went to both a mask and a face shield. So everybody in production and in the office, if you're not kind of off by yourself, you have to wear both of those. We were able to not lay anybody off because of the hand sanitizer, so that was great. The other thing we did a little different, we had a Mass State grant for lean continuous improvement at the time. So we focused a little more on that on our downtime to try to really help to drive our costs down so that we could be competitive in the long term.
That's great. So just a quick question in terms of like moving forward. I know I hear a lot of people say, well, they were wearing masks all winter, so they didn't get any colds or flus this winter, right? They noticed that kind of a thing. Will there be practices that are carried forward? Maybe not so much. I know everybody's going to be glad to get their masks off and that kind of thing, but will you folks all be requiring vaccinations, or how are you handling that aspect of this?
So from my perspective, what we're doing is we are not mandatory vaccination, but we are telling people that we do want you to get it. We have about 50% of our current staff vaccinated, and it'll be about 75% in the next 2 weeks as it's become more available and easier to sign up and get an appointment.
Great, thanks, Eric. How about you, John?
We are carrying forward. I know, sanitation and hand safety, obviously, cleaning them, sanitizing your hands will be a must. We do a lot in trying to do less so with temporaries. So trying to figure out who got vaccinated, who didn't. I know most of our office staff have been vaccinated and or have reached immunity through beating the infection, having caught COVID and then overcoming it. And so we just recently released the mask restriction up in our office areas, because there we know we have some control who is vaccinated, who isn't. Certainly we're going to keep a tight rein on visitors coming into the building. Temperature checks will still be taken for those folks. But out on the factory floor, we're going to continue the mask mandate until the state lifts their requirement. And then vaccination has been voluntary. We have posted several times when we know that there's a clinic, especially up in the Fitchburg area or Leominster area, to provide that information to the people on the floor, make their own decision to go. We certainly are not going to require people to get it, but I think more people than not believe it's safe and are willing to do so to protect their future. You know, if they have elderly at home or children at home, that sense of protection rises up inside of them, and they want to do the right thing. But I think we're going to continue just to monitor the situation, obviously, throughout the summer. I still believe firmly that there'll be some outbreaks, but you know, medical science has come a long way. Where even if you catch it, you know, they have a cold laser treatment now for to help take care of clots in the lungs. You know, remdesivir has been a good tool to use to kind of stop it in its tracks before they have to get you on, you know, intubate you on a you know. So a lot of good things are happening on that front, but we certainly don't want to take it for granted that, you know, it's a one and done as of the 29th when the governor pulls the mask restriction off. So I think we'll see people on the floor, they're going to wear it on their own. I mean, some people just have that sense, you know, like their security blanket, that it's better to than not to. And so I think that's what we'll see on our end.
That's great. Thanks, John. How about you, David? And David, maybe you can talk to a little bit, like if did you have any people that worked remotely during this time, and has that changed any of your practices for the future?
Sure. For us, I think, you know, just to echo both what John and Eric have said, we did very similar procedures where we implemented certain safety protocols, primarily based on the CDC guidelines. And then we took, I think we were even stricter, honestly, on the guideline than the guidelines were when we needed to be. And for us, you know, I think when it first hit, we did have some individuals prefer to work from home for the first couple of weeks. And I think then after the first couple of weeks, I think we realized, as well as the employee may have realized, or employees may have realized that we're working from home, that it was a little bit more efficient to be at work in the facility, just because you missed out quite a lot if you weren't here. We obviously do communicate very well outside of work because we have a central communication system, but nonetheless, it's not the same when you're not in the office. And so I think once the first 2 weeks kind of passed and we realized that this was going to be for the long run, and once we, you know, instituted those policies where we were spread out, we had masks, we had face shields as well. It's kind of determined that it would be safe enough to operate in our facility. And unlike, I think High Gear and United Solutions, we're much, I think, smaller manufacturer. I don't know how many employees you guys have, but we doubled last year in size, and we're just around 20 employees, and that includes our production staff. Now, granted, the reason why we have such little production staff is we have two fully automated production lines. So we don't technically need a lot of operators. But nonetheless, what we realized were kind of a combination of things. One, we operated better as a team. And two, like I said, we had to pivot quick, and we did. And we were fortunate enough that our pivot was in an industry that was kind of dire, which was disinfectant. It was kind of like toilet paper, right? It was nowhere to be found. Lysol was not on the shelves. And we stepped in pretty quick, and we had a product that was working really well that people really liked. It was a great customer experience. And so we actually were all hands on deck, because we were running, for the first time in the company's history at that time, 24-hour shifts, 7 days a week.
Wow.
And so we had no choice. Literally everyone in the company was on the line at some point or another. It was kind of all hands on deck. And so for us, I think at this point, now that things are starting to reopen, we'll take it one step at a time. We don't necessarily have like a mandate on vaccines, but actually I think all but one person in the office, and that person is me, are not vaccinated yet, which is great for our staff, because we're pretty confident that we can keep our staff safe, which is nice. And in addition to that, we also we still kind of have this. We've always had this policy where, like, if you are sick, don't worry about the sick days and all that stuff. We'll take care of that once you're feeling better. Just stay home. There's no need for you to come in. Now, for production staff, that's very different than obviously our admin staff, and the admin staff specifically has a lot of work that they can do remote. So typically, even if someone is out, they will do whatever they need to get done. And we have very tight deadlines. Like we work at a very fast pace. So for us, we have to meet a lot of the deadlines that we set out, and everyone's kind of aligned on the same page to get those goals done.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. So the next topic that we're going to bring up is, it's kind of, I think, a topic that's on a lot of people's minds. We're talking supply chain here now, okay? So the pandemic pointed out supply chain issues and weaknesses, and there's been some thinking that this situation will only help us to strengthen our supply chains here in the United States rather than, relying on all the global supply chains. But when that was the thinking in the thick of the pandemic. But now that we're hopefully headed forward and out of the pandemic, are supply chains being strengthened here at home? What is your take on the whole supply chain issue? So let's go ahead. We'll start with you, John.
The chain, she's broken. Yeah. But right now, plastic is very difficult to get a hands on with the winter events. The freeze that they had down in Texas earlier this year shut down some equipment that was making the plastic monomer, which has put a strain on the base to make the rest of the plastic material. And frankly, right as the demand is coming up, because more people are coming online, more people are getting back to work, so the demand is up and the supply is down right now. So that's a critical situation for us here and many in the plastics industry. A lot of the plastics dealers, brokers are doing force majeure and just not shipping and breaking contracts. So it's very difficult. But on top of that, even some of our paper, our cartons, steel for handles and axles for wheels for trash cans. Canada, Trudeau did a nice job protecting everybody and pretty much shut the country down. So lumberjacks weren't cutting down trees, steel mills weren't running. So now, but there was very little demand. Now the demand is up, so the supply is not there. So we find that supply chain has been critically affected as well. So we're mulling through it the best we can, obviously, and sort of nitpicking and piecemealing with vendors as we have to get through it. But I'm sure sometime after the summertime, I'm hoping things will return to normal in our supply chain. But that's where we're at right now. It's funny because it was a slingshot effect during the height of the pandemic. We were okay. The demand was down, so even though we were still operating and the companies that were still operating, the supply was there. But now that slingshot has come fully to the other side, and we're looking and grasping.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that your timeline on thinking when things might kind of start to bounce back a little bit at the end of the summer or whatever, because I was going to ask you, when do you see that coming around again? So thanks for answering that. Eric, your thoughts on supply chain?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what John said. It was a really big issue for us in the packaging industry because the cleaning products really put a stretch on the supply for bottles, caps, and triggers. We had lead times going from what would normally be 3 to 4 months to 12 months to 18 months. It was unbelievable. Yeah, just incredible. That's why I use the word unprecedented. In addition to that, the shipping costs doubled and tripled in some cases, and that's still going on. But luckily we have a kind of a nice group of companies that we work with. So we're able to share bottles and caps with each other to get through, and got to give it to my team here. They did a fabulous job of being innovative around getting products in, doing some substitutes and things like that where we needed to make sure our customers were supplied. But it was a huge issue. I think, we're still in it, but certainly some additional capacity has come on board for triggers and things like that. Some vendors have jumped in and opened up some facilities to get capacity. So I would agree, probably late summer to fall, we'll probably see some easement back to where we were.
That's great. Thanks, Eric. How about you, David?
It's a great question. I think for us, supply chain was definitely strained and still is. Being in the chemicals business, kind of like what Eric mentioned, it's tough right now. Especially not just with the pandemic and shutdowns overseas, because most of the stuff that we actually do our suppliers are actually mostly domestic. So things like, you know, the pipes bursting in Texas were like a huge problem. That's put a global shortage on glycol ethers, which are like a main component with almost every chemical product. So, you know, we're making it work. But we definitely are feeling the constraints of having a weak supply chain globally, because there's a shortage in almost everything that we're doing. Luckily, our packaging has been fine. Well, the bottles have been fine because we have a very unique package, and we're the largest customer of the supplier of our package, of the plastic bottles themselves. It's a pressurized container, but doesn't use any compressed gas besides air, so it's very unique. And so, unfortunately, we were okay on that front. We have more than enough bottles. The problem came kind of like what Eric mentioned on the valves and the actuators and the sprayers, and even like labels. Right now, we're struggling with our label supplier, who just, you know, we notified them that we were putting in a new PO for something, and it turned into normally what is like a 10-day lead time, if not quicker, for reprints, is now a whole month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you work with lean manufacturing and you're kind of working on very tight deadlines, like I mentioned, it starts to hurt. And then you have other things that are taking 14 plus weeks, like any of our actuators or valves that may have come from, let's say, Italy, for example. We're talking, you know, 15 to 20 weeks minimum to get to the port here.
Wow. Thanks, folks, on that. We're going to go ahead and ask now about communication and technology adaptations that maybe have been made with you and your company. What has your company experienced with these adaptations, and will they continue post-pandemic? And then what I really want to know is, does cybersecurity now begin to take more center stage? And will viruses, hackers, ransomers, and the dark web become our new pandemic? So let's go ahead and start. David, we'll start with you on that one.
Sure. I may be a little biased here because we have a fairly young spirited company, and a young company in general. I mean, we have some seasoned execs here, but we all act young. It stems from the leadership. And so, you know, to some degree, our communications, our technologies have always been further ahead, and being, and this is not meant to target United Solutions or High Gear. Being on the younger side, we're still, meaning the company's age, not being 100 years old, it helps because we're not necessarily stuck to a system that we've been using for the last 10 years. And so we've been able to maneuver and use new systems, or we've integrated in only the last, you know, couple years, new technologies that we've been using since. And so from a technology standpoint, the way that and this is where my bias comes in, I'm a big believer in, you know, innovating or dying. And I know there's a Q&A question that has been posted regarding automation and manufacturing. My entire thesis is, look, at some point, everything's got to automate, or something will, you know, something or a position will automate, and there'll be a new position open. So instead of worrying about it, what do we do to adapt and attack the issue head on and be proactive about it? And so for us, we didn't have any issues with technology. You know, I think many people may have had a short transitionary period, but if anything, this pandemic showed that you need to have flexibility in your business operations, because if you're too big and you cannot move because you've been stuck in the mud with the same procedures for the last 50 years, that's not going to help anymore. You need to be able to adjust with the time. And so we've been able to you know, kind of address that head on, and we didn't really have issues there. But I think, you know, I think there constantly have been and will continue to be issues like, you know, what's happened with the pipeline, right? And maybe not to that scale, but you can point to many different disruptions in industries all over the world every couple of years that are pretty large, pretty sophisticated. The reality is, you know, there's always going to be something, and the best thing that we can do as owners or manufacturers or business, you know, folks, is just really make sure that we look at our businesses and see if we're doing everything that we can to be properly equipped in case something like that were to happen, and having those contingency plans in place, like Darcy mentioned.
Well, I was just going to say, Darcy, do you have a viewpoint on this topic?
Yeah, so in terms of technology, right, here's what I've observed. So we're kind of like a hands-on, we like to be, in a company, sleeves rolled up, really on the ground floor with you, seeing what's going on. But obviously the pandemic had to shift and change all that. And that we had to really move ourselves into a more of a virtual Zoom kind of model like this in terms of the planning. But technologies or what's going to happen moving forward with safety, I think David made a great point that should apply to the safety concept, which is companies that are well established, that's been doing it a certain way for long periods of time, are going to have to relook at how they're managing safety. And do we have safety as a culture within the company? And small manufacturers, typically they don't have a safety person. So that this is shared responsibility on everyone else's to-do list. And I think they need to come up with new strategies, new ways for safety as a culture, right, within a company, and how things are going to get done moving forward. I've seen a shift. I've seen a change. Lisa, as you know, we do lots of work with Mass MEP, and the manufacturers themselves are now asking for new ways and new strategies of getting these things done related to safety and related to compliance. And I think the workforce, and I'm sure we're going to have a conversation about workforce. Here's what I'm hearing and seeing from most manufacturers. We don't have workers right now. We're lacking employees. And one of the biggest risks in manufacturing, and what the biggest concern is that I'm hearing, is onboarding and the new hire process and getting these employees up to speed with safety. And what do we have in place already? What is our process for getting someone on board and integrating right away? And when we don't have a strong foundation, safety is a big elephant. And I say you can't eat an elephant in one bite. You got to eat it in one bite at a time. And so I think that the way we've been doing safety, there might be some old strategies. We might need to be looking at some new ways to get it done and really looking at integration of culture.
That's great. Thanks, Darce. Eric, do you want to make a comment about technology and communication?
Sure. I think we're lucky that we have a really bright IT director, and we've always kind of done a really nice job of staying ahead of technology. And I would say we also have a strong continuous improvement culture. So I would say it didn't affect us much, the pandemic itself, when it came to, but this type of thing. So everybody had to have the flexibility to work remote, right? That was the biggest challenge right out of the gate. We use a virtual desktop, so it's pretty easy. As long as you get a laptop and a Wi-Fi signal, you can get into our system anywhere. So we'll continue to use that, continue to have the flexibility to work from home if needed when people aren't feeling well, because as everybody else said, if you're not feeling well at all, we just say stay home. You got a laptop, work from there, and come back when you're feeling well.
Okay, thanks, Eric. John, how about you? You have concerns about cybersecurity and technology and that kind of thing?
Well, to separate the two, the cybersecurity is obviously something that every company that has a computer is concerned about and should be concerned about.
Yep.
And we haven't seen much of an influx in any cyber crime or breaches. We've had a couple of small hacks, but the ball picks them up and reports them, and that's due to having more people working from home from time to time, which we've opened up obviously through the pandemic. Of course, the vast majority of our manufacturing folks don't have that luxury. They need to come here where the machines are and work their day. But so we've had a minimal amount of disruption on that end, but have weathered it fairly well. As far as the technology, we also are looking more towards the last 3 years or so, building up more of a presence in robotics and trying to diminish our need for manual labor. It'll never go away, but we're trying to curtail it, and it's especially poignant now, right now, where everywhere you look is a help wanted or a hiring bonus. We'll sell my kids for cheese sign just to get people in the workforce, for goodness sakes. It's been crazy. So, and as far as safety, I have to agree with Darcy. If you don't keep them safe, you don't keep them, right? that's going to be our number one. We have a lot of folks that, that we're dealing with, and still some transients with temporaries, so it becomes an issue. But so far so good, and I think going forward, I think the company has the right mindset and vision to continue to work on the technology to help get us into the next century.
Okay, well, that's great. And again, you keep setting me up for the next question, John. I think this is great. Because what I'd like to do is say that, like in looking ahead, we've got to all face it. Everybody keeps going to be saying, we're going to go back to normal. And I'm going, there's no going back to normal. What we're going to do is move forward into a new normal, right? So maybe you could share with us your insights about what a new normal looks like. A lot of people have been saying there's going to be a manufacturing renaissance. And are you seeing a manufacturing renaissance and that kind of thing? So I would love to hear everybody's thoughts on that. And maybe we'll kick this one off with Darcy. From your perspective, what does the future hold for manufacturers?
Okay, so here's what. So I go based on what you guys call me up concerned with, right? So that's how we gauge what's going on in the field. Like what's keeping you guys up at night and not letting you guys get the sleep that you need. And so the workforce right now is a big concern in manufacturing. And with that, obviously, that's where the safety element comes into play. I see so many manufacturers right now doing temp to hire. They don't have a strong onboarding process, as I mentioned. There's a quick turnover. We have a more educated workforce. They understand who OSHA is. Obviously, we just came out of a pandemic. Everybody knows who OSHA is. Everyone knows that they can call OSHA now. Everyone knows there's these rights and this idea of protecting and keeping us safe in the workplace. Generationally, I'm 50. So in my generation, we didn't really know, we didn't think about calling OSHA. We didn't feel like we had a personal relationship, back then. Now it's right here. So safety moving forward, I think, number one is you have to have it integrated into your company. You got to create a foundation around it. It's going to have to become one of a pillar. It's going to have to be an element to your, what your foundation is built on as a company, as an organization. I don't think it can be done by one person anymore, or, in that sense, these smaller companies are going to have to integrate it across the board in middle management. I think we're going to redefine frontline supervisors and middle management. I think if you are looking for a job and you want to get ahead, I think you build up your safety side of a resume, because every manufacturer would be thrilled to hire someone who can be on the production floor and problem solving and taking care of some of the safety compliance stuff. So I think we're going to be redefining our job descriptions, what we're going to be looking for, what we're going to be asking for in the future of manufacturing when it comes to safety from that element. I think the other part is we are going to see a regulation coming down, which is a control plan, infectious control. I think that what you're going to see is, yes, mandates for masks in the state of Massachusetts are going to go away at the end of the month. But companies, you guys are all private businesses. It's your sandbox. You guys get to make the rules. So if you guys decide that it's safe and it's in the best interest for people to be wearing masks, then you can make that decision. But then you have to also understand what the repercussion is of those decisions. What does OSHA say about that? What's the PPE rules? How are you going to follow with that? Then it creates the supply chain. Vaccinations. I think everyone should know that if your company is thinking about mandatory vaccinations, not recommending, but making it mandatory for employment, OSHA's already came out with a statement saying that this can now become a recordable if you are mandating vaccinations of your employees. So you need to understand the repercussions of some of the choices and decisions that you guys are going to be faced with, right? So when this new federal regulation comes out around the pandemic, everyone's going to have to take a look at it again, really dissect it, decide what's right for them. Remember, we're not all created equal. So decide what's going to be right for you as it relates to your company, your organization. I can tell you air quality is going to be a big deal. The filter systems that you're using, the air that we're breathing, it's going to be all different kinds of conversations where this stuff used to only happen and the conversation used to only be mostly in the healthcare side. Now we're seeing it in general industry across the board. I mean, restaurants, manufacturers, the insurance agent, the attorneys, right? They don't have to fill out OSHA logs, but guess what? They have to be concerned about all these new pandemic rules.
That's great. Thanks, Darcy. So I'd like to ask you quickly, John, we're kind of running out of time here, but from a centenarian company's perspective, right, looking forward into the future, what do you see?
Well, I think the going back to normal, it's like being married. You know, every year is different. You know, as well, and as life changes, right? The kids grow up, or you know, the grandkids come, retirement comes, whatever. But life is never the same 3 days in a row. It's just the way it is. And business is the same way. Whether it's new regulations, whether it's trying to find new supply chains, whether it's trying to refine the workspace on the floor to make it more technological or to make it more efficient. Whether it's new ownership, you know, we have to. One thing, when you're in business, you've got to learn how to dance. And if you can't, you know what? There's no sitting on the sideline drinking the punch. You got to get in and get it done. So as far as going back, I don't think going back's ever been an issue. It's how quickly and how efficiently can we press on and move forward. And again, to Darcy's point, you know, it's working together, it's networking, it's strategizing, and then make the best of what we have to make it the best for everybody we deal with.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to kind of throw out a follow-up question here, just as the closing question, really. We've been talking about the need for workforce and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering about the role that you see of vocational technical education, what that will play moving forward to help with the workforce challenges we've been talking about here today. So Eric, do you have some thoughts on that?
Sure. I think they play a huge role. The more people we can get interested in manufacturing and get them out in tours and show them that it's a good job and you make real money. And we've partnered a little bit with the local community colleges to try to push that, what you said, to be specific, and trying to work through that. But I think the other slant I'd put on it, and it goes kind of with the last question, but part of this, with the labor shortage, I think more than ever, there's more pressure on us to automate. So we've got some automation projects that we're doing to get more out of the current assets that we currently utilize with the same amount of labor, which is great, but really automating and getting people trained to come to work in manufacturing environments. It's not the old dark, dungy factory that it was back in the 50s, right? These places are good places to work, so we just got to educate the kids. So I think they play a huge role.
That's great. And I think that what I'd like to do is just toss this one to David now, because he's already talked about automation and how automation shouldn't really be a dirty word, because what it does is it creates new kinds of roles and positions in manufacturing, right, David? So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you see for the future of manufacturing and how vocational technical education maybe plays into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think vocational education is probably, in my mind, at least from a manufacturer standpoint, going to be what I envision to be way more important than someone who's just very educated. We've noticed in multiple scenarios where, as a manufacturer, for us, you know, we care about having the right people do having the right people do the tasks that need to get done, and not necessarily over engineering anything, right? And what we've noticed a few times is when you have people who have a ton of experience or have, you know, real life kind of training, hands-on training, they're a little bit more apt to handle a problem in the field because they've already experienced it. Whereas someone who simply has the educational background, they're going to end up, you know, just kind of being a theoretician, so to speak, right? They'll come up and run formulas, run numbers, and they'll tell you what's great. And there is a place for that, absolutely. But I think the emphasis is going to de-escalate from having someone who's an engineering expert, and more so to the people who have vocational experience, especially for those who come out of high school. Because for companies like ours, I mean, we're local in Framingham. There are many different vocational schools here in Massachusetts, and we're very lucky to be able to have that advantage of speaking to these schools and trying to recruit students out of them. For companies like ours, and I think any manufacturer or person who's or a company that's looking to be a manufacturer, there are two things to keep in mind. One, yes, things are going to need to automate for various reasons, but two, there are so many different opportunities that come with that. Automation, it can be seen as a dirty word, but it can also be seen as this, hot and sexy word, especially in new age businesses that are fundraising or looking for acquisition strategies. At the end of the day, it's still going to require a human being to actually take care and fix those machines or get them up and running and to QA and QC them. So there's a lot of need to have physical presence despite automation. Automation just means that you don't necessarily need to the way I envision automation, right? I think automation shouldn't be seen as a dirty word, because in reality, what automation truly means is you are building a production line, for example, that can run on its own, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to run on its own, right? So you're building something where you don't need to rely on people physically doing something, but the reality is you're still going to rely on people physically doing something. So there's always going to be a need. And at some point, when we get 20, 30 years from now, to answer that question directly, maybe we'll have to revisit this kind of scenario. But the reality is you're going to need to innovate or die. And that's just how entrepreneurship or any company in the world works.
That's great. Thank you, David. And I want to thank all of you for being here and part of this amazing conversation here this afternoon. I'm going to turn it back over to Peter before he gets out his big hook and yanks me off the stage. Thanks so much, Peter.
Lisa, you're well within the timetables, and thank you all for a fantastic conversation. John, Darcy, Eric, and David, that was really stimulating, and I know Chris Prosser promised before we started that it would go by quickly, and I think it really did. So that's the first part of this virtual event. The second part is now going to be broadcast, and that is a special video presentation of the 2021 Manufacturing Excellence Awards. As you watch from your office, or more like your living room, or maybe your home office, we hope you had a chance to grab a beer. And while this panel was speaking, I went and grabbed, this is a Wachusett Wally, a manufacturer from Westminster, another North County company. And I know John had said you can't sit on the sideline and drink the punch, but hopefully we can all sit on the sideline with an adult beverage and celebrate these winners. And please feel free to congratulate the companies and the honorees in the chat box on the screen as you watch the video. Thank you all again for joining us. And here come the awards.